I'm clothing designer Dina Chavez. Welcome to ACC's Fashion Hour at the Fashion Incubator.
Okay, we are here. Welcome. My name is Nina Means. I'm the director for the Austin Community College Fashion Incubator, and we are here for Fashion Hour. Today we're going to be talking about fashion and diversity, diversity in fashion industry, and we wanted to get a chance to just share with you a little bit about the Fashion Incubator. We are a program that was started with the City of Austin alongside of the Community College and Gerber Technology in an interlocal agreement that provided an opportunity for us to create a high technology solution for designers here in Austin. It's really for us to be able to work on business development for local startup businesses, but also workforce development and really capacity skill building. So we're really excited to get a chance to partner with the city as well as with Gerber Technology to be able to provide this opportunity to our community. Just a little bit of housekeeping. ACCTV is filming today. We're really excited to have them. Episode 101 from our first Fashion Hour is actually going up next week on Channel 19, so you'll be able to watch the playback of our first Fashion Hour on Channel 19 starting next week. Also, if you are tagging or taking pictures for social media, feel free to use hashtag ACC Fashion Incubator, hashtag ACC Fashion, or hashtag Fashion Hour. I do want to get into our very esteemed panel here. We've got Loretta Edelen. She is from ACC, the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and she's been doing an incredible work with the college with just kind of introducing ideas regarding inclusion, how we're servicing our students across the various backgrounds and how they're interacting with our college, also how our employees are also experiencing that as well. And so this is something that's very important for the development of the college as a whole, but also how we relate to the community. We're really excited to have her really to speak on behalf of that. And I think that this is really going to add a lot to our conversation today. Dina Chavez is a local designer for Sixchel, and I'm going to ask you to tell us so much more about your brand in just a moment. But Dina has done an incredible work with really focusing on ethical sustainability when it comes to fashion, but also being incredibly focused on inclusion and diversity as well. She has been able to create a beautiful collection. You'll see some of the pieces here from her line. These are prototypes from her most recent development, but they're really beautiful pieces. So at the end of the show, you feel free to come up and take a closer look at some of the work that she's done. The ball gown here is a piece of work from her custom line, and so we'd love to hear more about that from you as well. So today we're going to be talking about diversity in the fashion industry. We'll not really be able to cover all the areas of diversity. We'll be looking at just a couple of areas, ethnic diversity and size inclusion for this talk. We are going to be looking at some of the things that have gone right, but we also are going to take a look at some of the things that have gone horribly wrong in terms of the lack of focus on how do brands appropriately represent various cultures in their marketing in their product assortment or not. And so we're really looking out for ways for us to kind of speak to some of these issues. How do these things, what can we do to do them better in the future? What should brands be looking at doing better in the future? And we would really encourage you to share during our Q&A any of your personal experiences or things that you'd like to see the industry do better in the future as well. We will do a Q&A panel at the end of this discussion. We'll be speaking for about 30 to 45 minutes or so, and then we'll save a few minutes towards the end to be able to field some of your ideas. But before I get into that portion, I wanted to talk with Dina. Dina, we really love your brand. We love what you stand for. And, I'd really love for you, one, to tell us, what does Sixchel mean? And tell us more about your business.
Okay, so hi. Sixchel, it's two words put together. So six is my astrological number, and Chel comes from the Mayan goddess Ixchel, and her story is that she was in love with the sun god and wanted to grab his attention. So she wove a beautiful cloth made out of gold and grabbed her attention. And then they had a volatile relationship, and in the myth, she's become a symbol of strength for women, especially women who are single mothers or who are battered women. And her symbol is the dragonfly. So it was a very personal story for me culturally. I am Mexican American, and it was a way for me to include that part of my background into my passion, which was my business, my fashion.
That's awesome. Could you tell me a little bit more about how did you start your business and what kind of product you decided to create?
Okay, well, I started my business, it's been about 10 years ago. And at that time, I was very or what was very important to me was size equality. I've never been a typical body type, and that, growing up in the 80s and 90s, the sizing was very different, and it was for a certain body, and it just wasn't me. So that's actually how I started sewing. I would, buy something and then change it so it could fit my shape, or I just started making my own evening gowns for, formals and things like that. So that was the first purpose of starting of my own fashion brand. And then in the middle of that, my sister was diagnosed with cancer. She was 35 years old, and her cancer was so rare. The doctors at MD Anderson could not explain why she was diagnosed with this very rare type of uterine cancer. So in my research and conversations that I had with a well-known lingerie designer from Austin, Megan Somerville, we had a discussion about Victoria's Secret and what their products are made out of. And lo and behold, there's research that they use a certain chemical that is linked to causing cancers. I can't say that was the reason. We're never going to know a reason. But just going through that and knowing this, I couldn't go on and say, oh, I'm just going to buy regular fabric, knowing that, it could possibly give you something, at least some sort of health reason. So that's when I started getting into sustainable and natural fabrics.
That's so powerful. A lot of design is about solving a problem, and so the idea that you were able to identify, one issue, with, the fabrics and the chemicals that are used to process those fabrics, and then what you decided to do differently in your collection by choosing breathable, natural fibers, or materials that were not using these chemicals in them, to be able to promote now to your customer who, are a variety of women, who want to feel safe wearing the clothing.
Yeah, and there's so much behind it. And the first thing that I learned about sustainability and that industry is that nothing's going to be 100%. So you have to find the values that matter to you. And to me, that's the basis. Yes, I am very, into the fashion industry is like the third largest industry that, gives pollution into our waters, and it's dirty, and we know all of this. But also specifically for us, health-wise, it's the same thing as organic food. We see organic food everywhere now, and it's more accessible. And we need to get that way with our clothes. There's a way to do it, and it can be very affordable. We just need to do it. The fashion industry is probably the only industry that's been running the same since like 1904. And there's no need for that with technology today. So.
Absolutely. Just to share a little bit more about the Fashion Incubator, we had created this, whenever we started with Gerber Technology as our digital solution, really to what you're talking about. The fashion industry has been, executed the same way for a very long time, and the opportunity for us to leverage technology to reduce the number of samples that we're making, to be more precise in the product, to be more precise in how we fit the customer, we're really able to target our customer much more specifically and to give them exactly what they want when they want it with the technology, and to overcome what would typically be a very costly process, but to not go too far down that, we really are, I think to your point, the ability for us to reach a wider audience is really looking at how do we use the technology to upgrade what's happening in the fashion industry. Totally.
Yeah, completely. It also promotes more individuality. I think because of fast fashion, we as a whole, as a customer, especially for women and young girls in particular, we're being put into cookie cutter characters, and we're making our women think you can either be this way or that way. And that's something that I've always had issues with growing up as a young girl, and I feel like we're not given the opportunity to express ourselves. When you see the history and think about the history of fashion and the reason why it kind of developed, it was a way to express our point of views or our feelings, either politically or personally. It has always been used for political reasons since the beginning of fashion. So, I think today in our modern world of fast fashion, it's been taken away from us. We're being taught how to think instead of finding that for ourselves. And I think we could do it with clothes, and like what you were saying, that's a way to bring it back into giving the customer the opportunity to decide exactly what it is that they're looking for and how they want to feel.
Absolutely. So tell me, so Loretta, what more do you think that, from your perspective, what do you think that we could be doing as a fashion industry where we could really promote more equity and inclusion? We're kind of talking about expression and how people want to, experience their clothing, but, are there things from your perspective that either as a customer or the fashion industry that could be done differently?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with such a talented artist. I think that in terms of the fashion industry, there really needs to be an interest in being able to serve different needs from the industry standpoint. If you are really trying to attract buyers in all shapes and sizes, then you need to be knowledgeable about what those needs look like, mm-hmm. what those cultures look like, mm-hmm. what things may or may not be offensive. Mm-hmm. And the best way to do that is to attract people that work for you who don't look like you, mm-hmm. who don't think like you,
yes.
and create the kind of environment that allows people to be able to have discourse without necessarily agreeing, but really being able to ask more questions about why a person feels that way about something, whether that's bringing in focus groups before you release something, or just really having another set of eyes different from yours to look over something before it goes out, because ultimately you are accountable to the people that you're trying to get to buy your stuff. I mean, you're
Absolutely.
Not just making it for yourself.
Absolutely.
Just for your own pleasure.
Of course. Of course, we have a customer, right? And if it doesn't sell,
exactly.
And I think that, a lot of businesses have missed that, moment is, they're saying, oh, well, this is just something that we believe in, it's my expression. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but, you really are in service of the customer.
Exactly.
And if the customer is offended,
yeah.
we're not really the ones to say,
yeah.
you shouldn't be offended by that. Yeah. So we have to find ways that we connect with our customer in a more authentic way.
Yeah.
I really love what you said about focus groups. This is, kind of marketing 101, right? Like you should be conducting focus groups on how they're, how they, receive the message. How does that look to the customer's eye, and
Exactly.
This comes up again and again. It's like, well, who was in the room making those decisions?
Exactly.
How did that come about? And so this is an opportunity for the fashion industry to be a lot more intentional
exactly.
about putting the product in front of a test group or a customer. Mm-hmm. But I think because of what Dina mentioned before with fast fashion, we're really seeing that we're so fast to get it to the floor to buy that we may not have thought through all the things that we're saying with the product that's landing in the stores.
And that's a scary thought when you see the kinds of things that have resulted because of somebody's rush to get it out there on the market, or somebody's thought that was real cute, but
Right.
Cute doesn't translate in all cultures.
It
So
doesn't.
again, you have to be mindful as a person who serves the public, how that's playing with the public that you're trying to reach.
Absolutely. Just one more look at Dina's line before we go into a couple of other images. It's a really beautiful collection, Dina. This is really, really lovely.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we were going to be talking about was, so on the topic of businesses who've missed the mark, this is actually imagery from the Dolce & Gabbana ad that enraged Chinese shoppers. And you know, I hesitate to say Chinese shoppers because it's not a monolithic place. You know, there's a lot of different kinds of people that live in China. But they put this ad out where it showed a woman in Western dress using her chopsticks to try to eat Italian food. And this enraged their customer. You know, it was, Dolce & Gabbana didn't seem to understand why this was so angering to their customer, but you know, they felt the backlash when it came to their sales. Prada is another example where they missed the mark on blackface being applied to, or the appearance of blackface being applied to one of their charms here, and it was supposed to be intended as, you know, a comical feature, but it's very reminiscent of Sambo, which is highly offensive for African American populations, but you know, Prada didn't realize that that was an issue. Gucci, again, making a similar error. And so, you know, as we look at these things, you know, they may make you feel a certain way when you see them, and we really do want to welcome that conversation about, you know, how should brands be representing or not other cultures? Cultural appropriation is something that is a term that's been used quite a bit for various things. Chola culture, I think this is something I wanted to ask you about, Dina, but also, you know, blackface and other things that have kind of popped up into our media streams about how brands are using these images to sell or dissuade customers who've been recently purchasing product, and how that's going to affect their brand, you know, going forward, and how that affects the customer going forward. So I wanted to just ask you, Dina, you know, I know that when we talked before that you're sharing just this really great story about just your experience of fashion and seeing your culture represented as, you know, a younger designer, but then kind of that evolution of how that experience, you know, came about over time.
Yes, so when I was a student here in Austin, you know, coming from a small town, it was the first time that I saw W magazine. So it's not in existence anymore, I don't think. It's become style.com, which I don't even know if that's in existence anymore either, but.
I think Vogue bought it.
Okay, yeah, so now it's all Vogue. But I'm reading this magazine, and it was a huge magazine. So it was like, so I'm looking through it, and there's an article about Cholas in Paris. So, you know, the history of the Chola is that it's traditionally a Mexican American living in like the barrio, the neighborhood, probably East LA. And the actual history, why I think it has continued, goes back to the Zoot Suit riots in the 40s in LA. So there's, you know, a cultural and political stance behind it, but it is a culture. And it's commonly associated with all Mexican Americans. And yes, I grew up in deep South Texas on the Mexican border, but it's not everybody. It's not the way I dressed or anything, though I might have some characteristics of it. But, you know, seeing it as someone who was a student here in Austin and for the first time really feeling, you know, this cultural shift for me, I thought, oh wow, this is really interesting. I didn't think anybody knew what a chola was outside of maybe the Rio Grande Valley. Like, I had no idea. And that it was being celebrated as a style, a cultural style, that people in, Parisians were actually, using it as, a beauty and fashion style was pretty amazing to me. And now to see it, that it's become a pretty good market. I mean, people, the story of the gold big hoops, that's part of it. It's becoming a little bit more accessible, the nails, the long pointy nails, just things like that. Gwen Stefani made it very popular. And for someone like her, that's where she grew up. Then she says these were people, like that's what she saw. So, it's become a style. And it's a very fine line, and it's one where I kind of do still have issues with it, because you can take it to something like this, and it will be offensive. But at the same time, I feel, and this is my personal complex with it, is that the more and more that you see a stereotype, the more you get comfortable with it. So now you're going to see a chola on the street and think, oh, it's just a style, like it's normal. Whereas before, maybe in the 1980s, when you saw movies with cholas in it, you thought, gang member, oh my God, what's gonna happen? So it's a way, I don't know if I agree with it being the way, but I mean, it's a fine line, but.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely an evolution into how people feel about it with repeated exposure. But to your point, we get used to a stereotype and then it gets reintroduced, maybe in a context that maybe wasn't as obvious to the person who is creating this. I spent a year in Italy, and I remember working with a designer who similarly wanted, for some reason, to use these large red lips. And she's like, could you put this on? And I was like, no, but she didn't understand because it was out of context for where she grew up. She didn't understand the feelings that went along with the imagery. And so it's easy to take it out of context because she, that wasn't her reality. That's not where she grew up. So it may not have been intentional, or she may not have understood the sting of the cultural insensitivity personally, but you kind of have to take someone else's word for it. If this is their reality, this is where they've started. So, I wanted to kind of push into this a little bit more. Mucha Prada, and I'm going to go back to the Prada bag. Mucha Prada was interviewed regarding the presence of this little monkey, and at least that's what it looks like to me. But she felt that the need to be culturally sensitive was infringing on her creative self-expression, and that her self-expression was more important to be able to put out into the cultural diaspora, so to speak, than to be overly sensitive. She's like, well, you can't create anything then. What else? There's no room for me to be creative if I have to always first think of which group may I be infringing upon their needs to feel validated. And, so she made it into something very different that personally I wasn't expecting to hear as an argument, that now all of a sudden we're encroaching upon someone else's creativity. But, when we open it up for Q&A at the end, I'd really love to hear from the audience, what you think about that. But for the time being, we'll discuss that here. What does that make you think, whenever you hear someone say, I'm actually more concerned about my self-expression than about cultural sensitivity?
Well, as I mentioned before, if the bottom line is to try and increase your sales, you do have to be sensitive to the buyer. You do have to be sensitive to who you're trying to reach. And that means potentially cutting into your creative juices. If you feel like that's okay, again, you need to feel comfortable enough checking in with somebody that does not look like you. Several somebodies that do not look like you, that do not feel bullied to agree with the way you feel about things, but people that you've created the kind of environment that invites kind of discourse, and someone to be able to comfortably tell you why they have issues with that. I mean, just like you mentioned with someone asking you to try something on, you felt comfortable enough in your skin to be able to back off and say, no, I really do not want to do that.
Absolutely.
But hopefully that person would have been smart enough to ask you, well, tell me more. And I think that's part of one of the things that I kind of shared out there as a kind of a handout, mindful inquiry that's put out by a totally, I think, another consultant. Mm-hmm. But it's also about how do you ask for people's input? Mm-hmm. You know, how do you make people feel comfortable in sharing their disagreements with, you know, how they would approach the thing differently? And again, that's how you are really able to draw from other people's cultures, draw from other people's experiences, and really create something that's a whole lot richer and ultimately that is more, I think, favorable for everyone. You know, it really kind of creates more of a buy-in when you open the door for someone to disagree with you. But when you ask enough questions to find out, just like asking Dina what her, you know, what her company, what her label means, that puts a whole new light on why and what it's about and, you know, kind of the reason behind it. Mm-hmm. So again, it opens the door for more conversation.
Absolutely. It puts it into context. And I think, you know, we're really changing the way that we consume products. We're really wanting to align with brands that that resonate with us. You know, and I think we're seeing a lot of change in retail behavior. Large box brands, large box business, like, you know, some of our department stores are really having a hard time nailing down their customer because they're kind of slinging this kind of one-size-fits-all scenario. But to your point, whenever you take the moment to really connect with, you know, the designer directly, and you're like, oh, well, why does she do that? Or what's the reasoning behind that? You know, there's definitely a more authentic connection. There's one thing that I wanted to touch on that you had mentioned earlier about sales. And, you know, you're right, you know, this is a business. Fashion is a business. And if you are insistent on ignoring your customer, you won't be in business much longer. You know, brands like Prada have, you know, the luxury of, you know, time and heritage and all these things behind them. So the money may not seem as pertinent if they're taking on new customers because they've got a base already. But for smaller brands or brands that are really expanding, I mean, Prada really needs to take note as well. I'm not saying that they don't, but, you know, for brands that are truly growing, like, you know, you have to take into account what your customer is looking for. You can't just produce the things that you feel very strongly as a creative, you know, sometimes, because you really need to be able to pivot and look at, well, did the customer want to buy it in blue or red? Did the customer respond to, you know, the piece that was, you know, covering her arms or not? You know, did they want the looser fit or the tighter fit? And, you know, as a creative, I may say, I really believe in oversized, but if my customer says, I don't feel comfortable in oversized, I've got to make those adjustments. I have to change the product to fit what my customer needs. And so similarly, if my customer is telling me, I'm offended by this, mm-hmm. I'm going to have to listen. And so the good thing is that Prada did wind up pulling this from the shelf. So this is not continuing to be sold. They did take note. They are recognizing that their customer is changing and that they have a much more diverse audience. And that everything goes viral. Everything goes, you know, someone had walked by the store in Soho, snapped a picture, tweeted it, and then before they knew it, a few weeks later, it's coming off of the shelf. Because the customer has that much power. Yeah. And so this is something that we're really seeing is, you know, incredibly important. And so if fashion doesn't pay attention to diversity, we're really going to have some issues.
I was just going to mention, kind of on the side, one of my daughters studied fashion design at some point at Washington University and became a buyer for Bloomingdale's and Ross. And her job was to go in New York and look on the street and find out what are people wearing. And that was the basis for them determining what they would be able to provide in terms of the fashions that are out there, the fashions that are hot. And so going to certain communities and seeing what people are wearing, again, gives them a heads up about what's really out there and
Absolutely.
what people really want to find themselves kind of wearing, just so that they can be in the know.
Right, right. I mean, street style inspires us, right? As designers. I mean, I'm a designer as well, and so I definitely feel, I'm looking at, okay, how's that woman putting her clothes together? What does she feel comfortable in? Oh, she's walking confidently. What has she got on? And so you're looking at how things are happening naturally, in the world around us. So I wanted to shift gears. To size inclusion. We are, let's see, we're doing good on time. I want to look at size inclusion. We have seen a shift in the demand for additional sizes across various product offerings already, and I think that, for a long time, we were seeing that 0 to 16 was seen as being sufficient for most brands to offer. However, they were offering most of those sizes between 0 to 8, 0 to 10, and that the sizes between 12 to 16, 12 to 18 were being left out. How should designers address size availability? And can you kind of give us a little bit of understanding about what that entails for a designer?
Well, it's a bit difficult, because if you're a traditional designer, like meaning you go to a fashion school, you go through a fashion program, it's embedded in you. That's the traditional size, size 4, sample size, and a skinny size 4 sample size.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit difficult to get away from, especially when you're working with a factory that, factory standard sizes is 6. And even then, I purposely, because I think, the most women that I'm around are Mexican or of Mexican descent, and they don't have, they have bigger hips and their butt is a little bit lower. And I know this about that, like there's different sizes. So when I submitted my pant measurements, they're like, this isn't gonna work. And I'm like, how can it not work? If it works through my machine, how can it not work through your machine?
Right.
So it's very difficult, but we need to get to the idea, which is going back to why something like this fashion incubator is so important, to what we're used to seeing. So, even in Austin, the typical model in Austin is not a size 4 industry standard. We need to get used to the idea that our bodies are not a stick figure. We have hips and we have breasts, and some women, our body shapes are very, very different from each other.
Absolutely.
I've even worked with twins, and their bodies were completely different.
Oh, wow.
So when we start, designing and learning and teaching and going back, I think we just need to get used to that concept. And then we need to understand that just the way petite sizing has been around for decades, well, we need to understand that the plus size woman doesn't mean that she's just plus or fatter. It's a different shape. It's a different height, everything. It's just different. Just the way the petite woman, it's just a different body. And once we get used to that, and the industry as a whole gets used to that, I think it'll be easier to just say, okay, as a brand, I have my petite sizes, I have my normal sizes or regular sizes, and then I have my plus size. So the factory will be able to, grade accordingly. And that should be the norm.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that, designers will come back to and say, well, it costs me more to be able to make more sizes, or, I do sample size because the factory understands it. And, and that can be really challenging for small businesses to overcome. Again, this is really where we kind of inject another moment with our high technology solution, is that, we're teaching our designers how to use 2D and 3D AutoCAD to be able to check the measurements of larger sizes or different sizes, different proportions, in the digital space prior to going to cut the garment. And so we're, saving on materials, we're saving on time, but we also get a chance to be more precise about how we fit the customer. It's clearly they're all different sizes, and just because one person's a size 12, it doesn't mean that size 12 looks the same on every person. The weight distribution is different. And so it's an opportunity for us to leverage the technology to be able to service our customer more specifically. I had one more question about this. As a customer, is there anything that can be done to motivate retailers to become more inclusive in the size space, or anything that we can do as a retailer to kind of, to bridge the gap here?
I would really appreciate people being able to celebrate the variety of shapes, as Dina mentioned, that are out there, and recognize that we are not a cookie cutter society. And there are several things that have come out in the past that really talk about, unless you fit into this, you don't fit. And that has really caused some trauma psychologically, especially for women, because we can be so cruel to one another.
Very much so. We need to do better.
To be real honest.
Absolutely.
And for an industry to be welcoming to folks that have a lot of different sizes and have the flexibility of being able to move into that and still feel like I look good. I'm not just wearing a little bulky, looking like a little, what is it called, a knapsack or something like.
Yes.
Just a little cotton sack that's gonna cover my body, but it's not really doing anything for me. But for a designer to really reach out and recognize that all sizes are not the same and all bodies shapes are not the same, and we should not be trying to force everybody into a size 4, ridiculous. But that's it. If you don't wear 4, what do you wear? A sheet?
Right. We have to offer more options for everybody. I sell to, there's a local boutique, Altitudes. She got Best New Boutique in Austin last year. And she has this beautiful boutique on the east side of town. And she was telling me, she was like, Nina, she was like, my average size is 14. She's like, I don't want your extra small. I don't want your small. I may want your medium. She's like, but I need large, extra large. She's like, I need you to go large. I need you to go bigger, please. And, if I want her business, I'm going to have to provide the sizes that she's asking for.
And just to be able to respond to what the customer wants, again, you as a designer need to be flexible in your offerings and understanding, as you mentioned, Dina, what those body shapes look like. How do you need to make the adjustments so that people feel that they are able to look nice? They're able to have some flexibility in the styles and the fashions that are out there, and not feel relegated to wearing a sheet all the time or moo all the time.
Exactly. No one wants to wear that. No one wants to do that.
No.
Is there anything else that we would like to chime in on about size inclusion before we open it up to our audience?
No, but I guess just to finish off about customers, I think the more that as we customers speak to the retailer and the brands and say, this is what we want, this is what's icy and this is what's normal, the more that they're going to be more aware. And I think that's a good thing. So we need to be more vocal, and the more we are, they listen.
Absolutely.
Because it comes down to making money and making sales. So
exactly.
We have the power and we need to put it out there.
We do. So the money's in your pocket and the power is in your pocket. So, we have to make decisions and let retailers know what we will and will not do. And they do listen.
With your pocketbook.
That's right. That's right. Okay, well, what we want to do is just kind of wrap up. As an industry, one, I want to thank the two of you for being here. I really appreciate your perspectives. Just as a customer, as someone who works in equity and inclusion, Loretta and Dina as a designer, understanding, what the hurdles are for designers in creating product, but also just your personal experience in, being, a designer of color in this space and, providing a product that really reaches women and what they need. So definitely thank you guys for being here. We are going to actually go ahead and open up for question and answer. So anyone who has a question for Dina or Loretta or myself, we can take your questions now.
Hi. So this is an open-ended question for any of you. I work a lot with independent designers, especially designers of color. I'm a journalist, so that's really, what I write about is, Native American designers trying to break into the scene. And what I'm finding in a pattern with that is that for decades, a lot of the indigenous designers that I talk to have been told by the factories and by the industry, there's not a market for your design. And then a week later, we see it in like TJ Maxx, or we see it on the runway, and it just, because the United States is the only first world country that doesn't have copyright protections on fashion design, how does that affect you as a designer of color?
It's a very good question. I'll jump in, and then if you want to jump in later, I think one of the things is you have to believe in the product that you're creating, and if you know that you have a customer, you have to deliver. There are, similar to Dina's experience, I am also a designer, and I was creating a pair of trousers that was intended to be a contemporary price point, so something you'd buy, the Diane von Furstenberg price point, things like this, right? I wanted to make a pair of pants, but I wanted to make it for women who had curves, because I felt that whenever you went up to the price point, they no longer made pants that you could actually put on, because it was cut for a more narrow body type. And so as a I'd like to buy a higher end pair of pants, but I can't find them that fit me. And so the idea was that we needed a curvier set of, measurements for suiting. Now, when I sent the measurements and the pattern to the factory to sew, they're like, something's wrong. Something's wrong with your back rise, like the part that comes up across your hips. Like, something's horribly wrong. This is never gonna work. And I was like, it does work, because I'm looking at the proto sample and it fits the fit model perfectly. Please just sew the garment, please. Oh, no, you'll never sell any of these like this. We should adjust it. And I was like, please don't adjust what we worked so hard to create. And sure enough, whenever you look at other brands that are, creating some additional product, I think some of the more mass market brands have room for this. Banana Republic has done a stretchier line that creates an additional width for hips now, and I was like, man, I wish that, I had a little bit more volume and a little bit more push behind what I was creating, several years ago, because now all of a sudden suiting for curvy isn't such a strange idea anymore. But before, it was something that people weren't really interested in taking hold of. So I believed in it personally, and the pants still fit really great. But in terms of volume and getting your idea out there, sometimes small businesses don't have the visibility that a large company would. And so sometimes it's easy for your ideas to get utilized in other places. And sometimes misrepresented, But this is something that designers deal with all the time, especially small businesses.
Yeah, it's true. And it is very difficult. It's kind of, I've had actual designs stolen, and not from a bigger company, but just from other little smaller companies. And it's fine, it's gonna happen. But I think the way that I have learned to get around it, and I'm sure Nina you have too, is that when you do have a small business or a small fashion brand, you can be more personal with the customer that is right for you and the customer that wants your product. And you can have that personal connection. So that's a way to look at it, a positive way to look at it, is that the money's there, you're gonna have a customer, they're there, you just have to find it. So once you get through all the, I can't believe someone stole my work, like what? You just go out and find your customer, and they're gonna be there because they want that personal connection. I think that's where we're going as an industry and as a customer too. So that's the way we get around it.
Hello? Okay. So something I was thinking about with the future and different size models, working behind the scenes of the fashion shows, there are models that do lie about their weight so they can be fitted, and they end up finding something for them sometimes, but there are still some designers that are really snooty about the slight change in size. And with me, as I'm getting older, I am gaining weight and getting bigger, and something I'm most sad about is not being able to wear some articles that I used to be able to wear that are my favorite. So my question is if you've seen or thought about adjustable clothing that will grow with you, kind of. I think especially people that have been pregnant, they just have to go to add the huge waistband and to be comfortable, but they don't feel confident in it because it's just a huge extending waistband. So I was wondering if y'all have seen anything or experienced any ideas moving forward with weight gain and still reflecting that beauty and confidence in that.
Yeah, it's there. There are smaller brands. There's one called Sotelo, and they were part of the same accelerator program that I did, which was Factory 45. And her brand is based on that concept. So the brands I'm sure there are more than, I just happen to know that brand personally. Sotela, Sotela. And I've noticed that Levi's, their jeans, they have something that I was like, what? And it's in the waistband. Kind of like little boys. I have a nephew, but when he was little, like they had a waist where you could make them tighter at the waist, so we would have to stretch it because he had a tiny waist. It's kind of that concept. So Levi's is having, I think it was Levi's, right?
I believe so, yeah.
They have that. But I think as a whole, as a customer, we're getting into that modern era, like, in the Hollywood and movies, it's like, I was gonna say 20, like 56, and everyone's wearing like the stretchy type of outfits, like
Yes.
very modern. We're getting that way. So I think that's going to help that problem. And I know, the clothes where we're going, where my brand is going into, is that's the type of fabric we're looking into, where it's more like athleisure wear, but contemporary clothes. So it's kind of like sportswear, but everyday wear, where it is going to be adjustable because it has that elasticity in it. I think that's just the way we're going. Zippers and things are kind of becoming a little bit obsolete, maybe.
That's really interesting,
So
potentially.
I think we're getting there, but there are some brands, and it's usually going to be the smaller brands to search and look for.
Very interesting.
Hi, I have a couple of questions for you, and I also wanted to give a shout out to a brand that I recently discovered in that vein, not adjustable clothing, but it's a brand called Universal Standard, and they do two things that I haven't seen done anywhere else. One is have a really wide size range that they call their universal standard. So everyone is a standard size, from the very smallest to the very largest. But they also have a lifetime size guarantee, and that's based on the knowing that women's bodies do change over their lifetimes, and that we often feel pressure to like squeeze ourselves into things that are really too small for us, or that we feel pressure to pretend that we're going to be the same size after we have babies as we were before, that we're going to be the same when we're 40 as we were when we were 20. And that's just not true. And so they say, like, we want you to invest in our garments and buy the size that like truly is right for you now, and send it back to us for a different one if that doesn't
Wow.
work. So
Wow.
I just love that. I bought my first top from them, and I love this so much.
Size guarantee. I love that.
Yeah, and it just makes you feel really comfortable. Like I don't have to try to imagine what size I wish I was or what I think I should be. I just have to like buy the size that's right for me, and then know I can change it. So sort of in that same vein, I wanted to ask you guys for your recommendations in a few areas of any designers or brands that you're particularly excited about, both in terms of like size diversity and then also in terms of who is doing a great job of kind of interacting with their customers, who's bringing more diverse representation into their brand. When I hear that sort of response from Prada, I just think it's such a sort of false excuse of, there's all of our work as creative people incorporates influences from so many different sources, and we can't pretend that that's like not happening and that we're not aware of it.
Right.
And we have no excuse for like not being in conversation with our customers and with our wider culture. And so I think there's brands who are really kind of pretending that they're locked in a glass castle and that, you know, they're just in their tower by themselves. And then there are designers who are doing a great job of like really bringing in diverse voices. And I'm wondering who you think is doing a great job right now.
Oh yeah, I have a couple. House Dress New York is a brand that started, I think, a handful of years ago. I'm not even sure if it's been quite that long, but they're size free. So there are no sizes. There's, so the clothing is somewhat modular, but it tends to be these like beautiful kind of airy, lightweight pieces that are kind of intended to, you know, be seasonless. So they're kind of saying no to sizes, and they've actually done very well. I mean, they're easy to buy for retailers because they just say, I want 4 of those or 100 of those, you know, whether it's a specialty store or a larger store. Hopefully 1,000 now that they're getting larger, but they do a really good job. They use natural materials, you know, it's really well done. For diversity, you know, in terms of, you know, representing body size and color, I think Christian Siriano's doing an incredible job. I feel like every time I see him present his collections, I feel like I see it on a variety of women. I don't understand how all of the back end of his sampling works because of how many different kinds of people that he's fitting on a regular basis, but he does everyone from Ashley Graham to, let's see, the comedian Leslie, she did Ghostbusters. Yeah, Leslie Jones. I mean, he's doing, and then on his runway, it's all over the board, you know? And so I think he's doing an excellent job to be intentional to include everyone.
I think he was one of the first to make a dress for Queen Latifah,
I believe so.
And it was, which for me, for size inclusivity, you know, she was always has been a larger woman, and she was one of the first. And I remember seeing her gown. I think it was for an Oscars. She was one of the first who was a big busted woman, and she wasn't covered up. And I used to always say, why do designers make dresses for women that way? It makes them look bigger. And I think he gave her a very complimentary cut, and she looked beautiful. And I thought, wow, like he's really doing something without saying it. Like he never came out and said, oh, I make clothes for everybody and you know, he just does it.
He just does it, yeah.
You know, I was looking, Diane von Furstenberg is one of my favorite designers. I was looking through her website, and it took me a while that I was like, oh, there's women of so many different colors in her catalog, like on her website. And it was normal for me, but I wonder what it would be like for someone who isn't maybe as aware as I am.
Sure.
But yeah, I thought, wow, I hadn't seen something like that.
I would agree.
Yeah, I just had to throw that in. So I think she's doing I think she really tried to bring cultural diversity more into fashion in America. So, you know, I hope to see that grow because we've made a step, but we have a far way to go.
I would agree with that, for sure.
Hi, hello. My name is Icy Walker. So I do a lot of things with youth and young adults. I have an event coming up next month at the end of April, and it's like free fashion consultings for teen and young adult women. With that being said, I was curious about peer pressure, trying to fit into this Instagrammable mold, and how does fashion positively affect kids so that way they don't feel pressured by fashion standards and things of that nature?
That's a very, yeah, I can't imagine what it would be like being a young teenage girl right now growing up around Instagram. Even, you know, women who are my age, my friends, it's like, you know, getting ready for swimsuit season, everyone's like, oh my God. I'm like, well, why are you looking at that? So I always say, you need to look at Ashley Graham's Instagram page. Just follow her, and you're gonna feel so comfortable about every dimple and piece of your body ever. But it's really hard, you know, to tell young girls or how to help them because, you know, having that young mind and what they see and the way they feel, it's a very difficult, touchy subject. And this is where, you know, when I was growing up, the fashion industry was more about, you have a problem and this is how you're gonna, my brand is gonna fix it for you. We need to start telling girls, no, 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 everything that you are it's beautiful. You already are. And you're not like anyone else, and that is why. So once, you know, we start with the vocabulary of that, I think maybe they'll feel more comfortable. And another thing is knowing that anything you see in a magazine, on social media, it's not real. Nobody wakes up looking like that. Even if you're wearing the t-shirt, you don't wake up looking like that. Yeah.
Some of the brands I feel like that are doing a good job of this is Aerie. I used to design for American Eagle Outfitters, and the Aerie brand was down below us in our building, and they would intentionally shoot the models without doing any retouching. So you would see, you know, every, you know, beautiful bit of every model, you know. We didn't cover them up, we didn't try to fix them, and it was much more realistic to what a teenager's body was supposed to look like at that time. So she wasn't trying to manufacture a thigh gap or try to figure out, you know, why, you know, is my skin not smooth here. You know, they just took the photo of the product on the model, and that was it.
I think that's really the key, is being able to expose them to a lot of different shapes and sizes that are out there, and people that appeal to being able to cover all of those shapes and sizes and celebrate that, and help the young ladies to understand, just like you were mentioning, the beauty that is within them, and recognizing that they really should not be trying to conform to someone else's standard, but rather to set their own, and to feel more comfortable in their own skin, to be able to go out and, as you mentioned, talk to someone at a designer, if you happen to meet one, and tell them what you're interested in looking like, and ask them to work with you on that. I had the fortune of having my mother sew for me when I was growing up, and so it wasn't a matter of, you know, will this fit, because she was taking the pattern and fitting it to my body. So, I mean, that's kind of a possibly an ancient skill now. I don't know if people...
We're bringing it back at the Fashion Incubator.
That's right. Well, that's a good plug.
We're bringing it back.
So maybe you might want to encourage the young ladies to look into the Fashion Incubator at ACC. All right.
You will learn how to fit your garment to your body here, for sure. Yeah, we do teach that.
I'm sorry, just really quick, another brand that's doing it that's kind of, well, they're a step, in my opinion, a step above fast fashion is ASOS, ASOS. And they're a British online brand, but they don't touch up their photos, and they have videos of their clothes, and you mean they're normal looking young girls. So yeah, that's another example of someone who's doing something about it.
Well, I think that's all the time that we have here today. I'm so happy that we were able to host both you, Dina Chavez, and Loretta Edelen. Thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So I want to encourage you all to come back to see us on April 26th. We'll be tackling sustainability and circular economy. We'll have Corey Sculpt. We'll have Michelle French. I'm looking because they're here in the audience today. And we'll be talking about sustainability and circular economy in the fashion industry. And we'll be right back here April 26th, 12 to 1. And we'll hope to see you here next time. Thank you so much for coming.